So we all know that Jack Laird was the showrunner for Night Gallery. He was trying to push out Rod Serling from writing less scripts. He was over editing his copy through his minions. And I basically believe he was a closet Satanist because there's many episodes of the series that had satanic overtones or basically were fucked up towards the dark realm. And one of these, of course, is I think one of the better episodes of the series since Aunt Ida came to stay. Now, it's not as benign as the title. Jeanette Nolan, a alumni of the Waltons and Twilight Zone, is extremely terrified, according to our good friend David Jewell on his WordPress, pretending to be trusting Michelle Lee's aunt in the Night Gallery episode. Now, there was season 2, episode 3. Jewell gave it 3.5 stars. I gave it 4 full stars. The teleplay was not by Serling, but Alan Sapinsley. The story was The Witch by A.E. Van Voigt. Directed by William Hale, did a great job. The husband-wife team of James Ferrantino and Michelle Lee at the time were the Lowell couple. Jeanette Nolan, using her own teeth, by the way. She brought it to the filming as Aunt Ada Quigley, and she basically becomes multiple versions of herself in a very important scene. Of all people, Jonathan Harris of Lost in Space fame, Night Gallery alum as well, as Professor Nick Porteous. Eldon Quick as Professor Frank Heller. Charles Seal as the cemetery caretaker, Alma Platt as the housekeeper, and Arnold Turner as the messenger boy. Now, our story begins with a kindly-looking old lady looking out from a second-floor window at her niece, Joanna, played by Michelle Lee of Knots Landing fame, as she tends to her garden. Joanna's husband, Craig, played by Ferrantino, is leaving to teach at the college where he's a professor. Joanna gives him a green carnation as he's about to drive off. On campus, fellow professor Nick Porteous, played by Jonathan Harris, another fussbot as he did Lost in Space, but of course he did Room 222 and Twilight Zone, and he's an alumni of that show as well, intercepts it and wants to discuss green carnations as they relate to the cult, but Professor Lowell brushes off this particular and peculiar conversational gambit. Now later, Craig is doing yard work while the old lady, Aunt Ada, is enjoying the sunshine while sitting in a chair. There's a very important scene where there's forced perspective throughout these scenes with Aunt Ada. A moment later, he looks back at the chair and she's gone. He comes inside and Joanna and her aunt are having tea. When Aunt Ada sees the rose bush he's holding, she starts to scream, saying she's allergic to flowers. It bears noting for those who might find it interesting that James Ferrantino's shirt is way unbuttoned here, and so perhaps he was overcome by the sight of his manly bare chest. Now, according to Scott Skelton's book on Night Gallery, I guess during the scene, Jeanette Nolan was so in character that she freaked out Lee and Ferrantino like you wouldn't believe. When Ada goes upstairs, alone with his wife, he expresses misgivings about her aunt staying with them, and then we cut to Ada in her room cackling. I believe, "Don't fret, little foxport, it's not going to be much longer," and chuckles ominously. Ooh. It should be also noted for those who might find it interesting that Jeanette Nolan is wearing ghostly white makeup on her face, which makes her look rather less alive than a typical kindly old auntie. Jeanette Nolan was a very beautiful lady, especially in Jezebel, but she could play all parts. Now, when Craig awakes after midnight, he comes downstairs surprised to find both Joanna and Ada awake too, again sharing a pot of tea. Ada has herbs to help Joanna sleep. Craig secrets one of these herbs away in a cloth, and in the morning gives it a lab guy in the college. Played by Eldon Quick, the actor who so memorably played Captain Sloan, who would not grant Hawkeye and Trapper John's request for the incubator, who were trying to procure in the early MASH episode of the same name, and famous line, "It's a luxury." Captain Sloan, Professor Heller, examined it and says it's seaweed and adds that folklore says it's sinister witch's weed. He recommends that Craig consult Mr. Smith or Professor Porteous for further amplification. Now, Craig studies logic and scientific matters, so when Porteous tells him that witch's weed is employed by an aging witch who has used up her present body to facilitate her entry and assumption of a new body, young body that has chosen for herself, he's initially skeptical. He's basically saying she's ready to take over your wife's pussy, using a Trumpism. Porteous continues to explain that his act takes place during the 12 strokes of midnight, during the first full moon after autumnal equinox. So This could be, like, Taco Friday or something. Professor Lowell proclaims this is ridiculous. Porteous points out that Lowell always wears the one thing that can prevent this transition, a green carnation. Now willing to admit there may be something less than ridiculous, Craig Lowell investigates Aunt Ada's identity and discovers that Ada Quigley recently died. He then confronts Aunt Ada in a manner reminiscent of how Captain Kirk confronted a purported Shakespearean actor when suspected of being a mass murderer by demanding of him point blank, "Are you Kodos?" The Conscience of the King episode. Craig puts it to her, "Who are you? Why are you here? What are you after?" No beating around the bush for these two strong leading men. In a Star Trek episode, the question of the identity was answered thusly: "Do you believe I am? I do, that I am." Here the response is subtly distant. "Ha ha ha ha!" Onega cackles. She then raises a thin veil she is wearing over her head, and suddenly three more of her appear that is packed in just one. Finally totally believing what the colleague has to say, Craig calls Porteous while we intercut to Ada simultaneously doing incarnation. Porteous succumbs to a stroke, and Ada appears wickedly to Craig over the stairwell banister. Jeanette Nolan is really believably scary here. The next scene has James Ferrantino completely shirtless, yet again, digging in the yard, talking Joanna, who surprisingly tells him that Aunt Ada is going to an old folks' home right after the autumn equinox. Craig insists that Joanna not be out of his sight until midnight tomorrow, which is Equinox Day. Incidentally, in the story, the date was given to September 23rd, which was the same day I was watching this, said Miss Jewell, which made me think, eek. Autumn equinox is September 21st, most times. Ada seems to will a telegram delivery man to come and bring a message to Craig, ask him to substitute for another colleague to teach his class that night. Craig explains the deal to Joanna about the whole bit that Porteous explained to him about the witch transformation into a younger woman's body before the stroke of midnight on that night, and as she, of course, laughs. But to ease his fears from them being apart, she says she'll accompany him to the lecture he needs to give for the colleague that night. Now, while he gives a lecture, we again get intercutting scenes with Ada at home. She's making a pentagram and quite good, and playing a nun in the Waltons really freaked me out. Then she gets in Joanna's mind. We get some scary hand-held fisheye lens shots of Ada chanting while the stormy night outside brings lightning. So it's sort of like the Oilers fans in Game 6 going to be tomorrow night. A good time now to cite director Hale for his fine work in this episode. Joanna, under Ada's spell, slips out of the classroom, unseen by her husband as he gives his lecture. She drives home. It's 11:50. Probably started at 10:30 the class. Aunt Ada's waiting expectantly as Joanna arrives. Craig realizes his wife is gone and runs home in a thunderstorm. Inside the house, Ada asks Joanna to take one more sip of tea she has prepared for her with seaweed, the witch's weed. Craig, this time in his shirt and is wet and clinging to his body, arrives home to the sight of multiple Adas surrounding Joanna. I think it was 9 or 10. He remembers what Professor Porteous said regarding carnations. He lights the green one he has with him, throws it on the witches, and they shriek, burn, and, what a world. And according to Jules, an intense scene, but Joanna's okay. Now, we get one final scene, this of Craig driving off the next morning, realizing he is what was his daily green carnation. He seems to decide, since Aunt Ada's gone, what me worry, and drives off, while we see Joanna giving a sidelong glance, which is a hint of anxiety at the green carnation patch in the yard. Now, again, according to Jewel, a strong episode, a good script by Alan Spinsley from the Voight story. Strong direction, and Jeanette Nolan was not nominated for this. She should have been. Michelle Lee, again, played herself as beautiful as possible. And James Ferrantino chess for the gay watchers of the episode, they still remember it. So since Aunt Ada came to stay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a 2 steps up from the men on film on TV. My boys, they're Antoine Merriweather probably said hated it, which means that Jeanette Nolan not getting a nomination for this, and Jespel, that's how it worked back then. Serling was getting the acting nominations, but this is the second strongest performance in the series behind Lawrence Harvey and Caterpillar and William Wyndham, and they're tearing down Riley's Bar, and also Richard Kiley and The Escape Route. This is unbelievable acting by Jeanette Nolan, one of my favorite actresses of all time. My only regret, I never met her in her prime, but I every time I have a chance to praise him, give a witch's love. So playing a prelude to Grandma Walton in that episode of The Twilight Zone, written by Hamner. playing the witch who basically puts a curse on James Best's girlfriend and potential girlfriend. And Ada here, my God, ladies and gentlemen, she gets my witchy woman, evil woman, my evil woman award of the day. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing, we're a Light Calorie podcast. We're going to be doing more for the summer of 2025 because I think we're living in satanic times under Donald Trump, that cunt-faced cocksucker that basically, if he doesn't get a bullet, hopefully people can send him a fleet for his next birthday. So if you like what you're doing here, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And by the way, if you're an American visiting this channel, you're a Trump supporter, please leave me a negative comment so I can ban you. I am banning all Alberta separatists, Quebec separatists, and Trump supporters from the channel. This is a happy channel, not a bunch of Michelle Smith, failed porn star, Jacques Parizeau loving, Donald Trump loving crackpots. Stay home and basically unsubscribe if you don't like. You come here for fun. You don't come here to post your bullshit like somebody was posting on one of my hockey podcasts. Said Canada would be a better NHL if Alberta separated. Said the NHL would be better if Alberta separated. Like, did Aunt Ada get to him? Did Trump get Aunt Ada should get to Trump? I hope so. Have a good one.